Oh man, Feast Week is almost here, and in between all your turkey and parades and Cowboys football, and maybe even during all that, there's a ton of great college basketball to watch, including Andy Patton, potentially the best MTE field we have ever seen.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoops show out there. We are your hosts. That's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade. What a joy it is to be with you. Man, we are so close to my favorite pre-March week of college basketball. If you want to get in on this and have more conversation with us about it, come join the Locked On College Basketball Discord. The link is in the show notes. Great conversations going on all day long. This episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to make sure that you have the right people for your team, and that's why you got to get in with LinkedIn Jobs, where you can do it faster and for free. Post your job right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Andy, it is a big MTE extravaganza today. For those who don't know, that means multi-team event. That's all these like Thanksgiving week tournaments that go on. We just call them MTEs. Get that acronym in your head because we're talking about it all day long. So we're going to talk about Maui. That's the biggest one. The battle for Atlantis. That's the other biggest one. And then we're going to do a little quick run around of some others. And what's best of all, you don't even have to wait till next week. There are tournaments starting literally today, Thursday. So Andy, let's get right into this Maui Invitational field because legitimately I have raked my brain to figure out if ever I had seen a more loaded MTE than this one. And I just cannot figure that out. Amongst these 8 teams, there are 9 previous Maui championships. Let me give you the field in order of FanDuel betting odds. Number 1 team in the nation, Kansas Jayhawks plus 175. Tennessee plus 320, Purdue plus 340, Marquette plus 500, Gonzaga plus 950, UCLA plus 2,000, Syracuse plus 5,000, and poor Chaminade, no odds listed. Andy, here's everything you need to know. We have 5 of the nation's top 11 teams, and Purdue, which is second in the nation, has the 3rd best odds in their own MTE. That's how bonkers this thing actually is. So, Andy, let me ask you this question, and we'll unpack it this way. I just said it. We have 5 of the current AP top 11 teams in this bracket. That means that the way an 8-team field breaks down, we are guaranteed that one of the nation's 11 top teams will leave this event with 2 losses out of it. So my question to you, and I'll answer it as well, who is going to be that team that cannot get out of here with more than 1 win?
Man, it's what an incredible field for starters. I mean, just unbelievable that Gonzaga is the 11th ranked team in the country and the 5th ranked team in this MTE. That is just unbelievably unprecedented. UCLA is receiving votes and is 6th. Like, that is an unbelievable field. The way that this has come together is spectacular. I think you kind of have to default to thinking it could be Gonzaga. Gonzaga has a really tough first matchup against Purdue. They did not play well against Purdue last year. This Gonzaga team obviously looks a lot different. I don't think that they are dramatically worse than last year's team, but they're not necessarily better either. I think that they have a really high upside, but are they going to be able to show that upside by November 20th? Probably not. So how do they handle Zach Edey? They can get out and transition a little bit more than last year's team because they have a better point guard in Ryan Nembhard, but they're going to struggle against Purdue. And if they lose against Purdue, I favor them against Syracuse, assuming Tennessee beats Syracuse. But then after that, they're playing, either Marquette or UCLA or somebody like that. And I think there's a real chance that they end up being a team that drops 2. Dark horse candidate, I think, is Marquette, depending on the health of Tyler Kolek. That was a team that played really well against Illinois, but they don't have a ton of depth. I think you said it before we started recording. They had 3 players score more than 5 points. I don't think anybody else was over 5
right.
for that
That's exactly
team.
Right. Yep.
And Kolek was one of them. And if he's in any way limited, either he's out entirely or if he's not at 100%, I think they probably sneak by UCLA, although it's not a guarantee that they beat a good UCLA team who's still kind of finding themselves. But even if they do that, if they lose to Kansas, they got themselves another game there, potentially against Gonzaga, potentially against Tennessee, Syracuse. Who knows how it shakes out? But it's hard for me to imagine that one of these teams ranked in the top 11 is going to come out of this with 2 losses. But like you said, that's the way the tournament's going to work out. Somebody's going to be in that situation.
It's a mathematical certainty. That's why, and that's just the guarantee. There could be 2 or more of these top 11 teams that finish with 2 losses. Andy, for a lot of the same reasonings you just said about Gonzaga, I'm going to go with UCLA as my team that winds up 1-2, because I do think, again, depending on the health of Tyler Kolek, 3 games in 3 days with his ankle, but I think it'll it was plenty enough against Illinois on Tuesday night, and now I know they got to fly out to Hawaii, and we haven't said yet, but our thoughts continue to be obviously with the community there in Maui.
Yes.
Glad we're still able to get this event in Hawaii itself on the islands. That's awesome. But I think he'll be fine for that game against UCLA. Too much Tyler Kolek, and UCLA loses, but then they're going to kill Chaminade, who will lose to Kansas. And then it's just UCLA probably against Gonzaga. And in that scenario, wait, Andy, my reasoning is all flawed here. UCLA is not one of the top 11 teams that we're looking at. You should have stopped me earlier. Yeah, it's got to be Gonzaga. You're right. Everything I just said is incredibly wrong. So Gonzaga is my play for that.
It's not wrong. It's just that UCLA doesn't count as one of those teams.
That's exactly correct. So then to that point, I would have to go with Gonzaga or Marquette on that side. Although, what can you imagine? What if it's Kansas?
Yeah, could be.
Kansas beats Chaminade. Listen, if Kentucky has enough to go with Kansas, Marquette certainly does.
Yeah.
And then who knows if, depending on who they go up against after that. So lots of possibilities.
Everybody's going to assume you're going to see a Kansas Purdue championship, but I'm not saying I'm putting a bunch of money on this, but if I'm not going to be surprised at all if when we're watching this championship game on Wednesday evening, if it's Marquette and Tennessee, that's not going to shock me at all, especially if Kolek is healthy. That could 100% be the matchup that we're getting here. Kansas playing in a 3rd place game, potentially against Purdue, is incredibly fun. And you get Gonzaga and UCLA in a 5th, 6th game there's a lot of really fun games that are going to come out of this tournament, regardless of which of those teams ends up with 2 losses, which of those teams wins it all. All these teams are going to be better basketball teams on November 24th than they were on November 20th. And I think that's what makes these things so dang fun.
Andy, you didn't even say the team that's actually going to win. It's the Tennessee Volunteers, my man.
Yeah,
they're taking this thing home. That's what I'm putting down on it right now. I just feel it in my bones, but we'll see. I'm going to be dead wrong, obviously, but I'm going with Tennessee. Andy, lots of fun. By the way, this tournament is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It'll be starting, all day Monday, starting at 2:30 Eastern, wrapping up that last game tips at 11:30 Eastern. Finals are on Wednesday. All over the place on that, starting at 2:30 Eastern and wrapping the 5th place game tips off at midnight Eastern, which I guess is technically Thanksgiving Day at that point. So, Andy, it's again, what a phenomenal bracket that we've got here. And it's so interesting because you got to reckon with things like, would you rather be on the championship bracket side and lose the 3rd place game, wind up with a 1-2 record? Or would you rather lose your first game, get on the losers bracket, and wind up potentially having a 2-1 record if you win the 5th place game? From a I want to do well in this tournament standpoint, you might want to go on the winners bracket, but from a resume standpoint in the teams that you're going to be playing, I think I'd rather probably have the 5th place option.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it kind of depends on conference as well. Gonzaga's in a situation where they want 2 wins. They want 2 wins out of this thing badly, because 2 losses for Gonzaga hurts their resume more. Even Gonzaga has kind of ascended past a lot of the committee really kind of not dogging on the WCC. They've kind of gotten past that point in the last half decade or so, but every win counts. And for Gonzaga, 2-1 versus 1-2 is significant in terms of a potential seed boost for them in March, because they don't have as many opportunities for quality wins. UCLA, the Pac-12 is not great this year. We already saw USC lost to Irvine. That hurts them. So UCLA is another team where I think maybe they want 2 wins rather than necessarily a higher seed in the tournament. Whereas Purdue or Tennessee, they might be more okay with finishing 4th as opposed to 5th, even if they have to take 2 losses. So I think that's kind of my thought on it. And I think it does depend team by team. But like I said, every team's going to be better out of this thing. And I know that's what the coaches care most about.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I can't wait.
Well, Isaac, North Carolina and Villanova last year in the Phil Knight Invitational, that's kind of where both their seasons went a little awry. And now both teams 1 year later meet together in the battle for Atlantis, and both teams have an opportunity to potentially right the ship. Villanova's already got a loss on the year. Can they make some noise in this tournament and potentially kind of save Kyle Neptune's, at least make his seat a little bit colder? We're going to talk about that after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You all want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best and most qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's honestly super easy to create a free job post, and then you just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. From there, simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates who have just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, now it's time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by another of today's sponsors, Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Tyler Kolek in Tuesday night's win at Illinois in the Gavitt Games, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good, full flavor, and well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. Even on that kind of bum ankle that we were talking about, who knows at what level of health it's at. But Kolek delivered 24 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals, helping bring around that Marquette team that only had 3 dudes scoring in double figures. Athletic Brewing has over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, sours, and more. And the brews are fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity more enjoyable, like watching one of these MTEs next week. You know it. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. Again, that's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times. So, Andy, we switch our attention from Maui to Atlantis. And this, it's not quite the field that Maui is, but we do have 3 ranked teams, and we have 2 teams that are in others receiving votes that, man, for you and I, these
are
very
intriguing teams.
Very intriguing teams that have made this field a lot better than I thought it was even a week or 2 ago. So let me run you through the competitors. We've got, in terms of FanDuel's betting odds, number 20, North Carolina at plus 330, number 14, Arkansas at plus 350, number 21, Villanova at plus 500. Others receiving votes, Memphis at plus 550. Also others receiving votes, Michigan at plus 650. Same odds for Texas Tech, Stanford at plus 900, and then Northern Iowa at plus 5,000. Andy, the battle for Atlantis kicks off on Wednesday, and we'll wrap up on Thursday. First round matchups, North Carolina and Northern Iowa, Villanova and Texas Tech. That's the top half of the bracket. Bottom half, Michigan and Memphis, and then Arkansas and Stanford. That's the last game there on Wednesday. So, Andy, here's the first thing for me, talking about that bracket. It is a bummer, a big bummer, that these 2 ascendant teams that you and I have talked about earlier this week, Michigan and Memphis, actually have to face off in the first round. I would rather see them on other sides of the bracket, maybe working all their way to the championship game. But Andy, who do you think wins that first round matchup of teams that we'd love to see in next week's AP Top 25?
First of all, I think it's just funny that I know we read off the rankings right now, but by the time this tournament comes around, Villanova is not going to have a number next to their name. I suspect that Michigan probably will by the time the AP poll comes out next week. But yeah, certainly a bummer that Michigan and Memphis drew each other in the first round here. I understand why that happened. I think there's a lot of really good games here. But again, Nova versus Texas Tech is probably the next most competitive game that we're going to get. Michigan and Memphis is kind of a level above that. Certainly you hope North Carolina doesn't have issues with Northern Iowa. Stanford just got beat pretty badly by a good Santa Clara team, but the kind of game where you would expect Arkansas to handle it there. But Michigan, Memphis is going to be fun. I think I have to lean Michigan right now because of the way that they have played, the way that they looked in that win over St. John's. I mean, this is a phenomenal team. I think Memphis is better than St. John's. I think they will put together a more competitive game overall just because they have more continuity, and Rick Pitino's team was a little bit all over the place in that game, but that's a team full of talent, and Michigan beat them pretty good. And I think Michigan's going to handle this one too. I think Memphis has a chance to make some real noise on that kind of consolation bracket side, but give me Juwan Howard's team here, the Wolverines, potentially securing a victory against Memphis and making some real noise in this tournament.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how I can't remember Michigan's next game after that one from Monday night, but really excited to see how Doug McDaniel and Namari Burnett follow up that kind of joint performance that they had. That was insane. I can look up their next game here in just a second. But yeah, I'm with you. I would take Michigan in this one, and then that makes for a very intriguing matchup with Arkansas on Thanksgiving Day. Boy, that'll be fun. And in fact, this bottom half of the bracket, because of Michigan and Memphis's ascendancy, makes this the more intriguing bracket half for me of the battle for Atlantis. Andy, you mentioned it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just agreeing with you. You're good.
Yes. You said it in your teaser, and I think this is an intriguing point. So last year, coming into PK 85, Villanova had just lost to Michigan State, and then they got swept by Iowa State, Portland, and somebody else. I can't remember who it was. Do what? Oregon. Yes. Thank you. And then North Carolina beat Portland in their first game, but then lost to Iowa State, and then lost to Alabama in that epic 4 overtime game. And then right after that, went to Indiana and lost in the final ACC Big Ten Challenge, and then went and lost at Virginia Tech. So as you said, 4-game losing streaks for both of these teams last year. We're about to find out a lot more about what both of these teams are this year, and that's going to happen. Andy, of those two, who would you feel better about right now in terms of both their performance in this tournament and their season?
North Carolina, and honestly, it's not that close, and that's not even being super high on the Tar Heels right now. I think they have some very legitimate questions about how things are going to work. Baycott and RJ Davis look really great, but how are the transfers? You know, Harrison Ingram, we haven't seen the best version of him. We certainly haven't seen the best version of Cormac Ryan, and I'm not necessarily a complete believer that Hubert Davis is the absolute answer, but all of what is going on in North Carolina, I think, is in a worse state at Villanova. Justin Moore is incredible, and my goodness, he looked absolutely awesome in that team's loss to Penn. He looks like a legitimate All-American, all Big East caliber player, but the rest of that team did not look good. I believe in Eric Dixon, but Hakeem Hart's playing 9 minutes and not taking shots off the bench. TJ Bamba has been inconsistent, to say the least. Like, I'm not a huge believer in Villanova right now because I watched the Penn game. Like, honestly, that's basically the reasoning. They did not look good. They had 6 assists total in that game. Kyle Neptune, I think it's a little too early to make any super rash decisions, but if they perform similarly to what they did in PK in this tournament, we're going to have some serious questions. I mean, if this is a team that's playing Stanford in the last game, or Northern Iowa in the last game of the tournament is the 7th, 8th seed, and they're, struggling with Stanford or struggling with Northern Iowa, we're going to have some real questions about Villanova, because the talent they brought in Hakeem Hart, in TJ Bamba, in Lance Ware, like, they brought in some real talent into this program, and they get Justin Moore back and they have Eric Dixon back for another year. Like, they're running out of excuses. And I think that North Carolina hasn't been super tested yet. I'm not sure that they're fantastic this year by any stretch. I think they're properly ranked in the low 20s, and I think that they do have a good chance of winning this. But my favorite is Arkansas, and I think Arkansas is probably a lot of people's favorites, and I think they're the most put together team in this entire tournament right now. But North Carolina looks better to me than Villanova, and I think that at the end of this tournament, it'll play out that way.
By the way, going back to what I said earlier, Michigan's next game is Long Beach State tomorrow, Friday night. That's their only game.
Shout out former Gonzaga head coach Dan Monson, coaching at Long Beach State.
Exactly. So should just be a little bit of a tune-up there before Memphis. But as for Villanova, let's not forget they play Maryland in the Gavitt games tomorrow night, Friday night. So they've got a tough test even before they get to Atlantis. So we'll be keeping tabs on that.
Villanova, Maryland is a game that 2 weeks ago would have had a lot more excitement than I think it's going to actually end up having.
That's honestly so very true, Andy. Yeah, it's so odd with Villanova. I just can't figure out like what's gonna happen here with this thing. You said it about Hakeem Hart, and we just need more from a lot of this. And I'm really intrigued to see that Maryland game, even though it's got like a different kind of intrigue now than it did.
Exactly.
Because both teams got some things to figure out here. Andy, I'm with you. I'm taking Arkansas to win this tournament. I feel like they should have no trouble with Stanford.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Michigan game tougher than whoever they face from the top side of the bracket if it goes that way?
I think it's possible. I mean, I'm trying to look at the bracket here. So if they beat Stanford and they play Michigan, they play either Carolina or Texas Tech, probably maybe
or
Nova,
Villanova.
I guess.
Yeah.
I think Michigan, that's probably the toughest game for them. If they beat Michigan, I think they probably win this thing. They're the best team, hands down. I think in my mind, they're the best team, the way Brazil's been playing, the way that the new guards have been playing for that team so far. I think they're the squad that's I don't want to say heavy favorite necessarily, but definitely the team I'm projecting. But yeah, that Michigan game, if Michigan even if they play Memphis isn't going to be easy either, but that's the game that they need to get by in order to win this thing.
So Battle for Atlantis might not have the same level of intrigue in terms of top elite teams, but there are a lot of questions I think we're going to get answers to in the Battle for Atlantis next week, Andy.
Yeah, the Battle for Atlantis, many other years would be the top MTE in the entire year, but that Maui field is just so ridiculous. But Isaac, Maui and Atlantis are not the only strong MTEs, despite having a ton of the best teams in college basketball. There are a handful of other fantastic tournaments that we want to predict after a word from today's sponsor, PrizePicks. Folks, if you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community every single week. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and total receptions. Folks, PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on a 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. For Thursday Night Football, Lamar Jackson, 224.5 passing yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. I know that Cincinnati defense is great, but give me the over there for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege now and use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege using that promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, it's daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Isaac, we covered Battle for Atlantis, a lot of intrigue in that tournament, especially with the way Michigan has been playing. We covered the Maui field, which we've been talking about since like July, as how ridiculously stacked that field is. And frankly, none of those teams have made it any worse. Kansas looks great. Purdue looks great. Gonzaga looks solid. Tennessee has looked improved. Like that field is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. But there are other tournaments. There are a handful of other fantastic tournaments with a lot of ranked teams. And I want to start with you, Mr. Shade, in talking about which other MTE, if for some reason you were told you don't get to watch Maui, you don't get to watch Battle for Atlantis, what tournament are you picking as your most intriguing, most interesting tournament that you are most excited to watch outside of those two?
Well, first off, if you told me that, I would cry tears of sorrow because I've been looking forward in particular to Maui for so very long. So don't do that to me. But secondly, if you made me do that, I've been debating between the ESPN Invitational and the Empire Classic benefiting Wounded Warrior Project. That's a mouthful. And Andy, I keep going back and forth. I'm going to go with the Empire Classic, and here's why. It's UConn, Texas, Indiana, and Louisville. And these games are starting this Sunday and then finishing off on Monday. It's funny because Louisville is kind of the Chaminade of this event, which is why, I mean, can you think of
man. Poor Cardinals fans.
I know, like, can you think of a typical college basketball year? If I told you you had an event with UConn-Texas, Indiana, and Louisville, we would lose our minds. But right now it's like, cool, UConn and Texas.
Right. Yeah. Normally Texas would be the least intriguing team.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of ways. By the way, congrats on getting Trey Johnson on Wednesday.
Huge,
That's a huge pickup for the Longhorns. Way to go. But Andy, here's why this one intrigues me. I've been curious to see what UConn actually is. I picked Texas as one of my Final Four teams preseason. Indiana has some interesting parts, but they're not really doing it yet, and Louisville, my goodness. We'll see. As we talk, they haven't yet played. Is it Coppin State they're playing tonight on Wednesday night? So we'll see what happens there. Dear goodness, they got to win that game. But Andy, I'm really hopeful to see a UConn-Texas matchup. Yeah. The reigning national champions versus a team that should have made the Final Four but didn't quite get there as they just dropped it to Miami. I like the talent on both of these teams in a big way. And I think I went with this one because that matchup alone intrigues me more than any of the matchups from the ESPN Invitational. So waiting to see that one.
So I'm also not going to pick the ESPN Invitational, but I was very close. So I do want to read the teams that are in that tournament since we were both very close.
Do it. I love that.
Picking them. FAU is the favorite betting odds at FanDuel at 250. Texas A&M is also at 250. Then you have Iowa State and Boise State, two teams that are receiving votes. I personally had Iowa State in my top 25 last week. They have one of the top 5 defenses in the country at KenPom right now. But then the reason that I'm a little lower on it is that the kind of the bottom half are not a lot of teams that really intrigue me. You got Penn State, who hasn't looked great yet. Virginia Tech, who hasn't looked great yet. VCU, who has frankly been disappointing this season. Butler, who has been okay in the games they have played, but I don't think is a particularly great team. So for me, that's kind of the reason the ESPN Invitational is down a little bit. I like the top end of the teams in there, but I'm not super intrigued by some of the bottom teams. So for me personally,
and by the way, Andy, let me just say that those games are Thanksgiving Day, Black Friday, and then that following Sunday. Keep going.
Great. I'm going with the Continental Tire main event, and I'm frustrated with how this has been, how the bracket shook out for the 4 teams that are in this. I'm picking.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
I'm picking it because I'm a West Coast guy. I follow a lot of West Coast basketball, and this has 2 intriguing West Coast teams, another West Coast team, and then Xavier. But the way it shook out is you have San Diego State, St. Mary's, Xavier, and Washington. And it shouldn't be San Diego State versus St. Mary's. That should not be the first round game. It is kind of astonishing that is the way this bracket has shaken out, because you have Xavier versus Washington, which frankly, not that intriguing of a game. Washington just has not looked good this season. They lost to Nevada. They haven't played well. I'm not a believer in Mike Hopkins. I think this team has talent. Severe Wheeler has played well. Paul Mulcahy has played well, but I'm not a big believer in this team. I think Xavier should win this one, but Xavier isn't super impressive to me. They played Purdue decently well, but San Diego State and St. Mary should be on the opposite side. Both teams that were ranked a week ago. Neither team is ranked right now because San Diego State lost to BYU, of course, and St. Mary's, shockingly, live on the show, by the way, for those of you who watched or listened to Monday's episode, St. Mary's lost to Weber State. But those are 2 very, very good mid-major West Coast teams. Both of them should have an opportunity. They should be playing in the championship, and they're not because of the way this bracket was set up. That frustrates me, but I'm still very intrigued to watch these 4 teams get a chance to compete. This tournament starts this Friday at 9:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus between San Diego State and St. Mary's, and then basically midnight on Friday night between Xavier and Washington.
And then the finals will be on Sunday. Yeah. Andy, same kind of situation as we had with Duke and Michigan State in the Champions Classic. One of those 2 teams that, we projected to be a phenomenal mid-major team is going to have a second loss by Thanksgiving. So that's what we're looking at here, Andy. And that wasn't, let me just point out one other field that they didn't get the bracketing right at all either. And that is the Rocket Mortgage Fort Myers tip-off. Good grief. It's like a bowl game. We've got Wisconsin, Virginia, West Virginia, and SMU. Clearly, it needs to be Wisconsin and Virginia in the championship game, but no, they are playing each other in the first game. Andy,
That's really bad. That's
Why
worse
are,
than
why are
your
we
one.
not organizing? We need a Locked On College Basketball MTE, and we're just gonna pick all the wrong games and just put the wrong teams against each other.
SMU is going to be in a championship of that
Yeah, I mean,
tournament
come on,
potentially.
what are we
Ugh,
doing? What are we
gross.
doing? Oh goodness, Andy, it cannot wait for these MTEs. It's going to be electric. I'm going to be just sitting there in my Thanksgiving turkey pants, eating, trying to not expand my waistline too far, but goodness, I can't help myself. It's going to happen. We all know it. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear what MTE you can't wait for. Let us know in the comments or come find us, join the Discord, and we'll chat about it there. Actually, Andy, as soon as we're hanging up here, I'm going to go talk about MTEs in our Discord. That'll be a fun conversation. Folks, don't forget to subscribe to the show on video and audio. If you're watching, smash the like button so we know you are here. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family, particularly if Purdue doesn't win Maui. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow when Andy will be right back with you. Peace.